Greetings, I'm Dave Householder coming to you from the Visitor Center at Anza-Borrego State Park in San Diego County in California, out here in the Sonoran Desert. And I'm going to give you some skills today that are going to help you untangle a lot of difficult Bible passages. The Bible is a complicated book. It's layer upon layer upon layer, kind of like you look at sedimentary rock out here with layer upon layer upon layer with fossils at different levels. And the Bible's like that too. Each person who wrote his or her part of the Bible wrote it on the shoulders of people who went before. And there was oral tradition, which became written tradition, which became Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, the prophets, the Navi'im, the Ketuvim, the writings. All of that came together, and then the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, Paul's letters, Revelation, and so on. And it's just this incredible, beautiful, layered work. But I'm going to give you some keys here because we're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 7, which is one of the most troublesome chapters in the Bible. It is so complicated. It is the Apostle Paul at his ADD worst. He's just all over the place with run-on sentences, a lot of complexity. He doesn't think in straight lines. He is a beautiful thinker, a profound thinker, an amazing, influential man, one of the 4 or 5 most influential men ever to walk the face of the earth, certainly by the effect he had on the world. He took a Jewish sect, a fragment of Judaism called the Christians, and basically made it a global faith system, global faith family for people of all races, all tribes, all colors, all whatever. And so an incredibly influential person, and yet he wrote in twisted knots, the kind of knots that you have to bring to your mom when you're little to have her undo it because you just give up. It's just too complicated. Kind of like the cords to your earphones that never quite get unwound, or the extension cord that never gets wound up right, those kind of things. So 1 Corinthians 7 is like that. If you tried to outline it and create a system or a flow chart from it, you'd have a really hard time with it. And that's the case with Paul most of the time. And basically, I'm going to give you some skills here to help you untangle things. It's sort of detangler. You can buy for your hair if your hair is long. You can put spray detangler in it. You can run a brush through it. I know they've got that for baby shampoo and some other stuff. So basically, when you look at the Bible, you want to let the Bible interpret itself. And here's one of the first rules. All parts of the Bible are not equally important. Now, they're equally true, but they're not equally important. The fact that David went from city A to city B traveling is true, just as true as John 3:16, but not equally important. In fact, even Jesus says there's more important parts and less important parts. He was asked, what's the most important thing in the Word? What's the most important commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And all of the rest of Scripture, he said, is subservient to that, hangs upon that. So take every Bible verse is worth a nickel, and you get in an argument and you get more nickels than someone else, you win. That's not necessarily the case, because there are parts of the Bible that are more important than other parts of the Bible. And what Paul was doing here was a typical thing for a Jewish rabbi. And he was a trained Pharisee, a trained theologian. And it's called Midrash, Midrash. Darash, verb, means to search the Scriptures, to start from a situation you're in, search the Scriptures to find out what's going on, and come up with an answer. It's kind of like a jury or a judge or a lawyer looking for precedent in the legal system in common law and finding precedent. Such and such versus such and such decided this. And if you can build an argument based on that, then you try to work some things out. And what he's working out here with the Corinthians is marriage and sexual relationships and what they should and shouldn't do. And here's Paul, who is painfully, obviously single here. I'm not saying it's painful to be single. I'm just saying that he is very, very single and says so here in 1 Corinthians 7. And kind of like going to a Catholic priest for marriage counseling, it's probably not your best bet. And Paul's giving out all kinds of advice here. And this advice is called Midrash. Now, you may not have used that word ever. You may not have any idea what it means, but it's basically discussing, searching the scriptures and discussing answers to contemporary problems based on what you find. It's a kind of research and making a case for things. So this is what Paul naturally does because he's a trained theologian. So he does this. He does Midrash. And he's continually trying to kind of work this out and work out the sexual thing and work out the marriage thing, who should get married, who should stay single, all this kind of things. It becomes a very tangled knot, but he means well. And you want to look at this as Midrash. And you've heard Midrash every Sunday. Every sermon is Midrash. The sermon itself is not scripture. It uses scripture. And your pastor seeks the scriptures and pulls out verses which are applicable to today and tries to create a case for some sort of action or some sort of truth or some sort of insight. And that's what I do here every day on the World Wide Well. This is Midrash. I'm trying to take the Bible and make sense of it and to discuss it together. When you go to a Bible study and you have a discussion over a certain verse, what does this verse mean for our lives today? You're doing Midrash. So what it meant and what it means, what it meant is very, very important at the time of writing. What did the author intend? To whom is the author writing? Where is the author writing? When is the author writing? What's going on at the time? And what problem is the author trying to address? Well, Paul is trying to address the challenging marital situation in Corinth. And it's a sexually complex congregation because some of them were involved even in temple prostitution because he speaks out against that. And so all kinds of crazy stuff is going on. He's trying to give them some sense for how to operate sexually and doing the best he can with it. And it's a chapter full of Midrash. Now, there's two kinds of Midrash, Halakha, which is more binding, and Haggadah, which is less binding. And he goes back and forth. This is the Lord saying this, and this is me saying that. Halakha, Haggadah. And basically, that's showing you that he's doing Midrash. Now, Midrash, this is crazy. Midrash is not technically Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, or the law. And Paul is doing Midrash, and Paul is not a fan of Torah. Now, what I mean by that is he translates Torah, the law, nomos in Greek. And he is trying to get people who are not Jews, who could care less about the Torah, who could care less about Midrash. He's trying to get Gentile Christians to be led by the Spirit rather than by the Torah. And he believes that it's wasted time for people to go back to the Torah if they're not Jews. To start with, it's just it's work that just never gets done. You'll never get there. And so figures that dog won't hunt. Let's connect people with the Spirit. But he's still so Jewish that he's doing Midrash all the time. In fact, his letters are pretty much full of Midrash. And what you need to understand is Paul is not instituting new Torah. Paul is not pro-Torah. Paul is easily the most, the person who wrote in the Bible the least enamored with Torah of anybody. That's Paul. So he's not creating a new law to be followed forever and ever. He's doing Midrash to connect his people in Corinth with good wisdom for living and living out their Christian life. So let the Bible interpret the Bible. If the Bible is speaking Midrash, it's Midrash, which means what he's saying is not binding for all time. Now, that's not saying that it's not true in his setting. It's not saying that he's not faithfully focusing on the situation there. But everything that Paul says is not a new Torah. Paul didn't take the old Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, lay it aside so he could create a new Torah of rules for us to follow. Paul is anti-rules. He just is. Paul is the kind of person who says the law kills, the Spirit makes alive. We need to follow the Spirit. Now, there's tension in the Bible because Jesus says that not one jot or tittle from the law will be wiped out. It all needs to be fulfilled. And it's really not that simple to put it together. There's tension in the Bible. There's tension between prescribed rules, like the 10 Commandments, like the love commandment, like Jesus saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's a rule. He says so. And this is a new rule. And to look at the Bible dynamically rather than statically, it's not a set of precepts which can be shuffled around like Lego pieces and created a moral system. You can create a moral system with it. It's not that at all. Sure, there are rules in the Bible, and those are like curbs on the road that keep us on the road and keep the car from going off into the ditch. But the important thing here is to remember Paul is doing Midrash. I'm doing Midrash right here. You do Midrash every time, or your pastor does Midrash every Sunday when he or she gets up and exposits the scriptures and searches the scriptures to see what is true. There's things in the Bible that are unmovable, and there are parts of the Bible that are interpreting those things, and there are parts of the Bible that are just interpreting local situations at the time. And the important thing is to let the Bible interpret the Bible. In other words, don't impose a system of thinking on the Bible. Let the Bible interpret itself. If it's poetry, let it be poetry. If it's history, let it be history. If it's life advice, let it be life advice. Whatever, if it's prophecy, let it be prophecy. Let the Bible interpret the Bible. And I just need to lay all my cards on the table. I believe that every chapter, every verse of the Bible is true. I believe God put it there for a reason, and that truth is incredibly, incredibly important. That being said, not all parts of the Bible are equally important. So don't get stuck in a tangled maze like 1 Corinthians 7 and try to create some system out of it for sexuality and marriage. Think in terms of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, loving your neighbor as yourself, and see it through that lens. That's the lens through which Jesus says we should see all of Scripture. And if we're loving God and loving our neighbor with all our heart, soul, and mind and all that stuff, then all of the rest of the stuff is going to fall into place, but it's not going to be easy. It falls into place through discussion, through working it out together. This is where we need Christian community, not just two eyeballs looking at a text. We need Christian community to work these things out together. How's this working for you? What do you think about this? Which part of the Bible best addresses what we're going through? So I hope I've given you some tools for reading the Bible, and I'm hoping that helps you detangle some of the things that are in there. I guess what I'm saying is if you see Midrash, it's Midrash, which means working out life situations as best we can based on what's going on. Midrash is not new replacement Torah. And if that helps, great. If it doesn't, listen to some other Midrash. That's the good news for today, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.